This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Views expressed by hosts, guests, or employees are their own and do not necessarily represent ATS or its affiliates. Mention of any company, product, or service is not an endorsement. While ATS and its sister companies share corporate ties, they operate independently. ATS is not responsible for the accuracy or content statements made. For questions, visit atsinc.com.
Welcome to Beyond the Road. I am your host, Justin. This is the ATS podcast about the trucking industry. We have been on a little sabbatical here for a while, so glad to be back here. It's getting into the start of summer. Freight market is got a lot of things going on, so excited to talk about that today with a couple long-term vets for the transportation industry. We'll cover an overview of just the main transportation market as a whole, but then dive a little bit further into Laredo, Mexico cross-border shipping, as that's been a pretty hot topic over the last year or two with nearshoring and everything that's been happening in that market. So dive a little bit into that and what we've been seeing for trends and just things happening in that space and how things have evolved over time, why they've evolved, those kind of things. So before we get too far, I'd like to introduce my guests. We have Lyle and Marty. If you guys want to give a quick intro on yourselves and your background and everything.
Sure. My name is Lyle. I'm the general manager of the Specialized Group. Been in the industry my whole life, pretty much, working and getting paid in it for 26 years now. Some of my time was spent on the reefer side, the van division, and now we're over here in the Specialized Group.
I'm Marty Bricks. I'm a business development manager for ATS Specialized. I've been with the organization a little over 16 years in this most recent time. Total, a little over 22 years with ATS in various different capacities. So all primarily in the specialized market segment, though.
So if any of you people watching or listening to this feel the urge to leave the transportation industry, Marty is the example of it's not that easy, and you end up boomeranging back. So glad you did, Marty.
Yeah, it was. It felt good for our family for the time, but it's one of those things that the transportation got into my blood, and it's kind of like, you're driving down the road, just whatever with your family, and you do the quick check to see who's hauling what and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was an easy transition to come back, or an easy decision to come back, but so we got a wide spread of experience here, and certainly there's been a lot of changes in that marketplace over that time. Let's talk about more current events, though. What have you guys been seeing just overall transportation market? Doesn't have to be specific to vans or flats or heavy haul or anything like that. Are you seeing any trends developing in the last month or two as we kind of head from spring into summer?
So trends, probably not, because it hasn't been
long enough.
There's been some things that probably make sense. There's some seasonality that's playing into some markets, which is making it heat up a little bit more. So geographically, there's some things happening. Marty, would you say end of month pushes are pretty normal again?
Yeah. I think what we experienced at the end of Q1 was what I would consider normal for the industry. Everybody's trying to get everything out the door, hit some Q1 numbers, things like that. And then it's not, it's pretty typical that the month following you kind of have, the volumes drop and so forth because everybody pushed so much out the door. So again, similar behavior going on right now for the end of Q2. Although it feels a little soft to me.
For end of Q2?
For end of Q2.
I agree. Yeah. It feels a little bit soft, even than the end of Q1 from just whatever real non-quantifiable my feelings feel of it.
Yeah. And I kind of, when I talk to others, I have a gut sense is pretty much what that's kind of how I kind of judge the market. I see what's happening in the stock market. You hear all the different discussions with the Fed about what they're doing. You look at housing starts. You look at all the different components that go into the global economy, and and some of the other groups that I participate in, and there isn't anything that says it's like super robust.
Yeah. So what are some of those factors you think they're impacting some of that right now? that you're feeling a little bit less push than you'd expect?
Well, I mean,
besides interest rates, you mentioned, right?
Yeah, and that was, there's been a lot of credence given to, or a lot of consideration about what the Fed is going to do this year. Quite a few people have had expectations for 2-3 rate adjustments and so forth, but again, until they really feel comfortable that the economy is really moving and we're gaining some momentum on it, that they're going to do anything with those rates to the point that it would change and kind of push people to get back into the purchasing mode of capital equipment, things of that nature. It's just, you look at it, and with where interest rates are at, I mean, you can see why people are sitting on the sidelines waiting to go out and buy a new piece of equipment.
Right.
I think
they're just pushing out the maintenance on whatever they got.
And I talked to another individual who's on the service part side of things, and they are, that is probably, in his opinion, that was probably the most normal business unit of that organization, because everybody's going to need the service parts.
Yep.
So when people aren't buying the capital, obviously the service parts would tend, or
it should go up in time, because you're going to be stretching out the life of equipment longer than you normally would.
Yep, exactly.
And that's inherently going to lead to more mechanical issues down the line.
Yep.
Could be, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that, you guys are talking about, the market as a whole.
Yep.
Right, and that's good that we talk about that, but there are pockets, there are segments of things that are moving. And, where I think new housing starts, I just read something, they're down significantly. And so, obviously that'll impact part of the industry, but, on other parts of it, the open deck, we're feeling good about other parts of the industry that we've, kind of hit ourselves in. And so, yeah, freight's moving in some of the markets. So it's not like it's completely dead, but it's not, people aren't beating down the doors to have your trucks every day.
Yeah, the nice thing about the open deck market is you do get a little bit of recession proofing on some of that larger industrial equipment that is needed to keep power moving, keep storing power, anything infrastructure related, stuff like that it's not consumer based, or it's not going to be tied to discretionary income, like some of the van retail market and those areas that's going to be the quickest area people are going to start to draw back on, is that discretionary spending. So it gets a little bit recession proof there. It's not recession proof by any means. Transportation is still transportation, and it feels the same impact economically as anybody else. Have we landed in a consistent spot on the tariffs? And I know in some previous episodes we've talked about some of the behavior changes that happened with some of that uncertainty. You had the front end loading where people are trying to beat the tariffs, ultimately led to different scenarios where customers may need storage solutions, and or then the culmination of front end loading is then now you might have depleted shipping schedules afterwards because they just produced everything, shot it out, and everybody's full of inventory. But has that levelized, or is there still a lot of kind of uncertainty, and are you feeling that impact volumes or business levels anywhere?
I think that the market has digested that information much further, so there's a better understanding as to what the impacts or the potential impacts could be. And I kind of based on some of the information that you see that the part of the USMCA agreement has helped identify where certain components may or won't be affected at the same extent as the potential with some of the newer tariff discussions and so forth. So I think it's just more so it took time for the market to get a better understanding as to what the real impact is going to be.
Yeah, so before, a lot of uncertainty. Now I feel like there's a general understanding of what's going to happen, or how people need to do business around it. Listen, it's still got to come in. There's still things that are happening, and so I feel like people just understand it and they're moving forward now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have seen a couple small examples of people, we've had discussions with that were maybe a foreign-based company that were going to start shipping to the United States in short order and then have changed those plans. But those were, people that are going to be trying to introduce themselves into that market and hadn't yet. And that's kind of changing how they're moving forward as opposed to people that were already doing the importing and everything like that. So yeah, very good points. Anything else like out there, is there anything else out there that is impacting things? Fuel prices, I know we've had some changes there. Have you seen any major capacity drawn out due to some of the different regulations that have been enacted, or just more time has passed? Have you seen any noticeable change in capacity?
So we're watching fuel closely with with what's happening in the Middle East. Fuel jumped this week, and I'm assuming it had something to do with fear of supply. So we'll keep an eye on that. That's such a huge expense for trucking companies. We have to stay on top of it, and so we're watching that. And if that moves, we'll have to make adjustments for spot quoting. Obviously, the contract rates will follow their fuel schedule, so we'll follow that. But yeah, the fuel's a big thing that I'm watching right now. Capacity wise, I think trucks are slowly leaving. People aren't buying new. The used truck market is picking up. That means that people are, if they do reinvest, they're investing in something used, which probably means that something old had gone out. So I feel like it's just this slow, gradual trickle out, and we will slowly come out. We'll continue to slowly come out of this recession.
Yeah, I think so. I would agree with that sentiment. I think it's gonna just take time. I think we've heard from our leadership, that there's been excess capacity in the market that, I believe our interpretation was that was going to, those trucks leaving the market would accelerate as the freight recession kind of lingered on. But, I think we've seen that there's some of these people have, these other companies have stayed in it for the long haul.
The miles are just getting absorbed by the people who are still in the market.
Yeah.
Is what some of the data has shown. So for all the people exiting, it's just everybody's having to run a little bit more just because rates have been depressed compared to the last couple of years. They've been going up this year compared to last year. But if you're looking at compared to, the COVID era and really before all the huge spike, when our spike in costs as a provider happened,
right?
That hasn't risen back up. So. Yeah.
I think that's
those levels.
That's a good point, Justin. We've seen our rates increase. I think if most of the data shows that rates are increasing. If you read any of the articles from the analysts, trucking companies are saying they're getting low single-digit increases, which that says that the market's moving a little bit. However, it's not enough to keep up with the cost.
Right.
That where it went to. And so we will still continue to see trucking companies leave.
Yep.
But it also, again, is an indicator that things are moving. Things have changed from where it was before. It's just not high enough to where it's going to positively impact people in a way that they stop leaving the industry.
Yeah, it's just that, it's still down from the COVID era, and that's why it kind of feels more depressed. But if you're looking year over year, I feel it's in a much better place in 2025 than it was in 2024, just from a number of different standpoints. All right, so that's the general market. Good overview there. Appreciate you guys' input there. Let's dive a little bit deeper into Mexico, Laredo, cross-border. I'm saying Laredo, obviously cross-border, there's multiple crossing points between the U.S. and Mexico, but Laredo continues to remain the number one from a volume standpoint by far commercial crossing point. And a lot of specifically the open deck stuff kind of lands there too. So what have you guys seen happening in that market? Is it still robust? The last couple of years, nearshoring was a huge hot topic in the industry, not just our industry, but just manufacturing as a whole. And is that continuing, or still continuing to see that? Are you seeing people respond to either threats or opportunities differently down there? Kind of free form here.
Yeah, it's been our best market. If you look at the last 2.5 years, the rates have been the strongest. The consistency of our freight has been the best out of that market. We pushed trucks there when other markets were struggling. And so from my aspect, there's still a lot of business. There's a lot of growth opportunities there. And so it's still a very even with tariffs going on, there's still a lot of freight that's flowing through there because there's been so much infrastructure built in Mexico that we can't go away from it.
Yeah. It's there's in the last decade, 15 years, whatever it was, there's been a lot of plant moves going down south of the border. That's where it is now.
Yeah, I would agree. And even to your point with the nearshoring, there's been companies that, the companies that have gone there, excuse me, they need time to get their production up and running, get their quality where they want it and so forth. So it's not like you can plug and play and you've got your instant volume that you need. So, there's going to be that continued ramp up from those new companies in that marketplace, and then you still have the stalwarts that have always been there. So, there's kind of to Lyle's point, it's been the strongest market, the most demand market on a consistent basis, week over week, year over year.
And we've seen because there's been a need, we've seen B1s come into play.
Can you explain what a B1 is quick?
Yeah, so it would be Mexican carriers or Mexican drivers that can run into the U.S. And so we've seen that grow. That's been a growing response to the need for freight coverage in the Laredo market.
I know there's been some negative light shine to that too. Where there's been some people caught improperly using those B1 drivers, where in essence a B1 driver it's a dual authority of sorts, but it's kind of like being an American authority carrier that can deliver or pick up in Canada, as long as we're not picking up and delivering in Canada. We can pick up in Canada, deliver in the United States, and vice versa, but you can't do like Ottawa to Manitoba or something like that. Mm-hmm. Under our own authority. So every time I open Freight Waves, it seems, so we've been in the Laredo market since 1990, ATS has been. So we've been down there 35 years. But every time I open Freight Waves, I'm seeing X new carrier opening 1 million square foot facility, Laredo, X new carrier, X new broker, X new freight forwarder, blah, 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 blah. It's expanding on and on. So the customers are going down there, but mm-hmm. there's also some increased providers down there. You guys seen any kind of change in how the freight is moving down there? Are you seeing, traditionally it's been on the open deck network market, a lot of through trailer service requests, mm-hmm. which to the public, if you're not familiar with what exactly that means, but that is where a carrier will provide their piece of equipment to a Mexican provider, and they will load it or unload it down south of the border, but it's staying, that freight, the only thing changing is the truck hauling it is changing. They're just swapping who's hauling that trailer between the Mexican carrier and the U.S. carrier. So the freight's never being transloaded or offloaded in a through trailer situation. Direct service is also called. Are you seeing, is that still a predominant way the freight's moving? Are you seeing any changes to that? What's kind of evolving in that marketplace?
I think it's based upon freight type and need. If you have something that maybe doesn't need to get to the end customer as quickly as maybe another piece of equipment, then there'll be a transload option, or the difficulty of it. Like we haul some stuff that it would be really hard and expensive and risky for the product to offload and put it back on a trailer. And so it's really product specific and need specific. And when we were down there last, Justin, you and I were down there, and it just feels like there's warehouses popping up all over the place. So from the dry space, there continues to be a lot more warehousing going up, which won't be through trailer service. That'll get offloaded and then in a future date, they'll bring another van in to load it. Where on our side, we're seeing some of that as people try to get more capacity, and they're reaching out. When you're doing when you're picking up at the border, now you're reaching a different carrier base. Like not everybody does through trailer service like we do. And so if you want through trailer service, you get to use us. When you offload or transload, you open yourself up to a whole new carrier base. And so it's very product specific as to who's using through trailer service, and who is who's offloading at the border.
Yeah, I mean, once you get in the specialized marketplace, you get a lot of irregularities as far as what that freight looks like, how it's designed, secured, picked up, and it's not as uniform as sticking a fork under a pallet and just moving it that way.
Yeah, and I think with dry van business, you can offload something, and if you damage something through that offload process, it's easy to replace a box or two.
Right.
Right, it's different on the open deck space. Every time you touch the product, you risk damaging it, and that could be 3 months before they produce that same product again, and now their end customer is feeling the impact of that. And so, on the open deck space, it'll continue to be a lot more through trailer service. I think as the van business continues to grow down there, that there's going to be more offloading.
So do you have any advice for, shippers either in that marketplace or looking to enter that marketplace as far as how to pick and delineate that and how to pick the best provider, the best solution?
I don't know. I guess for me, from my point of view, it would really be dependent upon what's their appetite for that. Is the product they're shipping something that could withstand multiple handling, because I know that is a certain area of concern with certain products. Kind of to Lyle's point, if you damage something from an open deck, does that have to go back to Mexico? Is that, so then you've got a whole new worry that you have to account for. You've got a whole new step in your whole process that you have to account for versus, potentially maybe a partial LTL or something, that repair part, something like that. So yeah, it really just depends on the level of comfort they have. Again, I think experienced and companies that have been in that market for the amount of time, such as our organization, there's a certain level of comfort in picking somebody like ATS, but they just really they've got to crunch the numbers. They have to do their due diligence about what's their freight spend going to look like, versus doing a cross-docking scenario.
Yeah, I think need is important. Understanding what your need is, understanding the speed at which you want something to get from Mexico into the U.S., because a through trailer service will be quicker. So that's really important. You also need to know who the company you're working with. Who are the carriers they're working with on the Mexico side?
Good point.
Right, and so you have to really have to vet that out and understand the experience that those carriers have as well, and the reputation that they have, and then experience, like Marty said, I would really look at somebody that's been doing it a while, because there are people that come in and out of that space. I was just reading an article that there's a pretty big company that's pulling out of their Mexico operations. Well, that leaves you as a customer scrambling to find somebody else to do your business.
Yeah, good points. How about, is there anything customers need to be aware of regarding the customs piece in Mexico compared to like a Canadian shipment or any other kind of customs clearance processes, or what's to kind of expect when you're dealing with customs or delays or anything like that related to that?
You're trying to put us on the spot here and really test our knowledge, and you run the Laredo. So I'm going to flip this back on you and see how well you know it, because, we obviously know the answer.
Yeah, right. So main difference is you don't have the luxury of as much pre-clearance like you do on Canada, where you can a lot of times have that pretty much good to go by the time you get to the border. And it's a pretty seamless transition for that driver as long as you got all your paperwork in hand, because you're in custody of most of it in those transactions. You're getting it from the shipper, the manufacturer, and by and large, you're getting everything you need in that one fell swoop. Whereas with the Mexican piece, there's a bunch of different documents. There's the carta porta, there's the interchange, and all those other documents, the DOTA and all this other stuff that require more interaction back and forth, and the timing of it all just inherently slows up the process, just to real layman's terms and broad stroke it. Where, in a Canada shipment, like I said, it's not uncommon for us to hit the border and, 30 minutes, hour, you're across the border and you're moving. It's just like a stop and fuel up. Whereas in Mexico, the most efficient is going to be a couple hours that I see. And I would say, standard rule of thumb is at least a couple days just for that exchange of paperwork and paying the customs and the duties and everything. So it is something you need to be prepared for in the process. And that would be part of the vetting I would do if I was in the position to be shipping anything to or from Mexico, is making sure that I understood exactly what is needed if I'm importing any goods or anything like that. From my standpoint, what kind of documentation do I have to be able and prepared to prepare and provide? Because any misstep in that process can cause a huge delay on these things going across. And, carriers equipment is valuable, and that time is valuable, and there's usually a cost associated with if those things get detained too long, some kind of trailer detention charges. So it behooves you as the importer, the customer, whatever your role in the transaction is, to make sure that you're got your piece buttoned up, because it's going to ultimately cost somebody money at the end of the day.
Yeah, to piggyback on that and understand who has what responsibility throughout that whole transaction.
There ends up, we deal with a wide range of customers with our Mexican shipments, those that are doing dozens of loads a day and have a very refined process, and those that move their first load ever. And you get a wild mix of experiences in encountering that, but there's a lot of times everybody's kind of going, who's doing this?
Right.
Who's doing this?
Yeah.
And, we as a provider with that experience and knowledge can help steer that process a little bit. There's pieces we can't control just inherently, just based off of who owns and has custody of the freight. But to the earlier points of partnering up with somebody that has that depth of knowledge in that marketplace, it's not the same process as some other customs clearance processes. So having that knowledge, those relationships that somebody you can lean on if something does get stuck somewhere in the process, definitely helps your freight get to where it needs to get to quicker.
So if your goal was to scare away any trucking companies to do Mexico cross-border, I think you did a really good job there. I'm telling us that. So, if you can, that sounded scary.
Okay,
can this be done?
It can absolutely be done if you take the time to have the conversations and ask the questions and figure out exactly what is needed in the process. I've seen stuff move very efficiently across Mexican borders, both ways. Mm-hmm. And that is from those people that are doing a dozen loads a day to the people that do their first load ever. But if they slow down and educate themselves a little bit and just understand exactly what is needed and who is doing what in that process, that will make that thing go significantly smoother.
And your
both ways.
And I'm assuming your team helps people through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We understand that just within our own organization, you run across different depths of experience with that kind of transaction, and it becomes a coaching opportunity in both situations, where it's in everybody's best interest for us to get that thing across the border as quick as possible. It's our own best interest. It keeps that trailer moving, and the quicker that trailer is empty, the quicker we can use it on another load and get productivity out of it. If we just throw our hands up and say, hey, not our fault, you guys got to figure it out, we're not helping anybody in that situation, and ourselves especially. So it's that's where that knowledge and depth of experience can certainly be a huge benefit for a customer. How about any shipper specific challenges you guys can think of that you've seen out there? Would you encounter or deal with different customers south of the border?
One customer that I spoke to, it's a newer customer of the organization, and they didn't have a relationship with a carrier per se. So their experience was that the truck that loaded the product in Mexico then transloaded to another truck within Mexico, who then transloaded to another truck within Mexico, and then brought it to the border. Then sat at the border until that chain of command was closed up before they could cross it, and then yet transloaded to another carrier to bring it to the final destination. So their whole challenge was they never knew when to expect their product at all.
So it's visibility, communication.
It was 100% visibility and lack of communication, really, from the way they described it. So, that's the benefit of working with an asset-based carrier who is providing that kind of service, and has that relationship with similar carriers, partner carriers as to ATS or what have you. They know what they're doing, and that's the asset side. That's the partnership. That's the value add to the transaction.
Yeah, it's that's one market where you talk about, anytime you have a third-party relationship with another carrier, you'll not anytime, but a lot of times you'll hear people referred to as partner carriers, right? It's just kind of a common industry term, but like you truly need partner carriers down south of the border. You need, because there is that lack of visibility, or there can be if you don't have partner carriers. And having that visibility and that trust and that just experience working together where it's a mutually beneficial relationship for both parties, so that both parties are interested in doing whatever is needed to keep each other happy, certainly can get extra consideration, extra care, and certainly with the whole visibility and communication piece, it really shores that up cleanly.
And the other piece that we haven't mentioned with respect to the cross-border is the CT-PAT. That is, if you partner with a CT-PAT certified carrier to handle your Mexican business, and then a CT-PAT, there's that again affords you another, another layer of protection for your cargo.
Could you give a 30-second overview of what CT-PAT is?
Well, CT-PAT is the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. So, in a nutshell, the cargo, when it's in the possession of the carrier, must be held at a secure facility when it's not in transit. So it affords more security to make sure that product stays intact, and it's safeguarded more closely.
It's a voluntary program that has very stringent requirements on what kind of infrastructure you need to have in place at all your facilities, to Marty's point about making sure that you have protected areas, you have fencing, you have lighting, you have video, you have access badges, so it's not just any bad actor could come and do anything they wanted to the load. And the original intent is to prevent terrorism and prevent people putting things on loads and in loads that shouldn't be moving across borders or across whatever, United States, wherever. But it also just adds an extra set of confidence, or an extra level of confidence, because that infrastructure is in place and it's a requirement, and there's auditing, and there's on-site visits to ensure that if we say we have fencing, we have lighting, we have cameras, people are coming and checking it out and making sure that everything is covered. There's no gaps in that fencing. There's no, malfunction cameras, anything like that. So it really holds the CT-PAT carrier accountable to make sure that everything that they can control in that process of maneuvering and moving that cargo is controlled. And there's not really any opportunity for anybody else to get in there and mess with it or steal things or add things or whatever. Okay. What driver-specific challenges related to Mexican business, cross-border business? Is there anything you guys can think of that our drivers encounter or that you've heard of out there with other companies?
Sometimes there are there are delays at the border, and so especially if there's something that's really time sensitive, where we have a driver waiting to run with it so it can get to the final destination, and we have to hold that driver, and we've committed to a customer that we're going to do it. The driver has to wait for the border crossing process to happen, and so there can be delays when you're specifically waiting for a load that is maybe just in time, but delays happen in an industry all the time, and so I wouldn't say that it's a lot different than delays in other parts of the country. But when you're specifically waiting for one load to get moving, man, the driver can wait a while to get things cleared.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with that. I would say outside of that, it's usually a pretty smooth process. Hauling into and out of there, at least from the domestic truck driver's standpoint. Laredo congestion, there could be traffic.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of truck traffic down in that area, but that's not unusual with any kind of major shipping point. Outside of that, it's I think things move pretty smoothly, usually just because, especially with through trailer service, just because usually outside of those times when we have to commit to a certain delivery date, tight time frame, just in time kind of freight, usually by the time a driver is dispatched to get on that load, that thing's ready to go, and it's already preloaded essentially, because it's already on the trailer and ready to go, and it's a pretty quick hook and secure and good to go.
I think I would think one component that I've heard of is when the broker who's going to be taking, let's say, a southbound load doesn't have that space, and so the driver will go to the terminal, complete the trailer inspection and so forth, proceed back towards the main bridge to drop it at the broker, but then the broker can't take it, so then he turns on and has to go back to the terminal. That would be, I think that I can understand how that's going to be a frustrating event with the driver, because he's, in their mindset, they're already done, they're already finished with their load.
Sure.
I brought it to the broker, I should be done, I can go on to my next one, but then I've got to go back to the terminal, which he was inevitably, the driver was going to have to go back to the terminal anyway, but still, it just is, so, that would be a level of frustration from their point of view, that it's just not as simple as that.
Okay, well, good. Thank you guys both for the update on kind of what's happened in that market, and also the market, what to expect down there. So tell me about ATS's capabilities in that marketplace. Let's get into that quick. We've been in that marketplace 35 years. Terminal, 18 acres. What can ATS do in that market?
Yeah, we have a robust capability, starting with the number of trailers that we have. If you look at from a heavy haul space, the amount of trailers that we have that can meet needs, those trailers can go through. On the open deck side, we have 3 main trailers that can go into Mexico, and we have a trailer pool of RGNs and low pro steps and flatbeds. So whatever the customer needs, for the most part, we have the trailing capabilities to not only get it to the border, but then safely transport it wherever they need to in the U.S. side. So really a lot of capabilities when it comes to the trailer types that we have, which, that's just not in Mexico. That's everywhere in the U.S. That's what we're kind of known for. The other thing is we've got a fantastic partner carrier group that has been with us a long time, and we've built long-term relationships, and they do a really, really nice job for us. They take care of our equipment when it's in Mexico. When it's returned, our drivers are able to, for the most part, hook up to it and go. There's always damages or something that could potentially happen, but for the most part, they do a really nice job with our equipment, which feels good, and then our product as well.
Yeah. I would add, we have 18 acres of on-site space there with a subsidiary of ours sharing a parcel over that we can dip into if needed. But we have 35,000 pound forklifts there, and cross-docking facility for any kind of van equipment that might need that. We have storage capabilities indoor through some of our partner carrier network. We are CTPAT certified, so it comes with all the bells and whistles of that, which includes 24/7 security. We have pictures upon intake and outtake of any trailer. We have trailer inspections upon intake and outtake of any trailer going into or out of Mexico to make sure that if we're sending it into Mexico, it's going in good shape. And when it comes back, we're then evaluating it to make sure that when it's going across the U.S. miles, it's in good shape. We have a very tenured staff. We've been in that marketplace for 35 years. We have employees that have been there dang near that entire time. And we have dedicated storage area to help you store your product if it isn't quite ready for final delivery. So we can check a lot of boxes there. You know, we can do your CTPAT certified requirement. We can check that box. If you need van freight, we can help you there. If you need open deck freight, we can help you there. Flat steps, RGNs, low pros, heavy haul equipment, storage, a lot of different areas.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a, we've got a bucket in there that's been there in the yard that's been there a while. But again, that was a need from a customer, and so it's there. You know, when they need us to move it, we'll send the truck and move it on to its final destination.
Yeah, and the volume that we do there, through Laredo is substantial. Like I said, it's the biggest market that we operate in, and so that allows us a lot of flexibility with the amount of trucks that we have down there. If we need to, we can use partner carriers on the U.S. side. The amount of trailers that you have in Mexico, you have over 300 trailers in Mexico that are there to meet the needs of our customers.
Good. All right. Well, before we take it away here, just want to quick thank you guys both for your time. It's a good discussion. Learned a lot, and really kind of excited with the direction things are heading, just the overall market. I know it probably hasn't been as quick of a climb as some people hope for, but very good points that is definitely moving up. So thank you guys both for your time and input there. But if you liked what you saw here, please be sure to check out our ATS YouTube channel for more ATS content. And drivers can find our driver YouTube channel with the handle @OverTheRoad, and shippers, if you like what you heard here, you can check it out, ATS Learning Hub at atsinc.com. Drivers can also find the Learning Center at driveforats.com. So if you're interested in a new career, find job openings at atsinc.com/careers. Thank you for joining us here today, guys.
You're welcome.
Be safe out there.